COVID out, Putin in.
Yeah, I mean, it is gross what we're seeing right now. No matter what your thoughts are on these subjects, it's just our freedoms are just getting decimated, and it is really hurt me to see. I mean, yes, we can talk about GME all day, and that will help your financial freedoms, but without your personal freedoms, we are nothing. And that is all we're seeing. Like, we got our freedom stripped during the Rona. And I mean, everyone, just if you saw the NPC video, then people just will accept whatever news line is fact and then run with it. And their identity will be tied to such news line to where they are just a walking, living NPC meme. And for 2 years, we suffered with this through the Rona. And no, everyone hand and fist opened the loss of their freedoms until the truth came out that it is not too bad, and it's just like a common cold, and there should not be these drastic measures against it that there are. And now they're starting to be dropped as the polls are starting to get wrecked. But without anyone having time to reflect and think about what happened, we have a new boogeyman. Instead of it being an invisible virus that we can't see, we now have a tangible enemy, Mr. Putin. Putin is related to the Germans in the 1930s and 40s with Adolf. And if Putin is like Adolf, then therefore anyone who supports or is not against Russia, they are therefore pro-Nazi. And that is the way that they're starting to rationalize it.
I like geopolitics, but I also know that I am so low on the food chain of understanding, I probably shouldn't talk about it. But I do enjoy thinking about it, I do enjoy reading about it. And I'm amazed and disappointed about the lack of curiosity from people who are smart enough, and I think would also enjoy it as well, to essentially accept the narrative, with what I suspect is very little critical thought. Of course, I can't read minds, I don't know what's going on. And nor have I been to Ukraine, nor do I know what's really going on that front. But from like a geopolitical perspective, a lot of the stuff was actually called out in advance, and it has to do with the Ukraine and the other countries nearby serving as a buffer. From the Russian perspective, and this is the thing that I'm flabbergasted that people haven't brought up because it's so self-evident, and it's Putin said it, Lavrov said it, even the EU, I think, said it back in the day too, saying, Merkel, I think, even came out and said it, or whatever. Don't quote me. My point is that, like, if I can think about it, and if I saw it, and I did see it before this happened, surely the strategic planners over in Russia and over in the Ukraine, in the United States State Department, et cetera, could have seen it too. Anyways, the point is that you can't, you need these buffer states to exist, and the buffer states need to be neutral. They can't be aligned one way or the other. Yeah, sure, they can have the odd trade deal, whatever, but you want there to be a balance. And the idea of bringing the Ukraine into NATO, like, that would completely unbalance a very delicate situation that must be balanced. So that's the first thing. I'm just flabbergasted that's the case, that, these people who should be able to see that, or they don't want to see that. The second thing I'm going to throw out there is that the people who I've talked to, they basically call Putin an idiot. Like, I can't believe he's such an idiot. He's so stupid doing this, or it's some permutation. It's basically a personal attack on Putin, saying the guy doesn't know what he's doing. My response to that is, again, I don't know what Putin's mind is. I've never met the dude or whatever. At least I don't think I've ever met him. But if you have someone who grew up in the ranks of the KGB, and as Friedman says, the KGB was the only institution within the old Soviet Union that didn't intentionally lie to themselves. If you saw someone who had a front row seat to the dissolution of the USSR, someone who said point blank that the fall of the USSR was a geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century, again, this is Friedman's words, someone who probably has a deep love and patriotism of his country, which nothing wrong with that. And if you have someone who knows that they need to have this buffer zone of protection or backup and to survive, however long Putin's been in power, I don't have those figures off the top of my head, but he's been in power quite a long time. I don't think that's an idiot. You can say you don't like him. You can say you think he's, despotic or whatever, right? I'm not going to argue pro.
And I would agree with that. I would say he's absolutely all the things that people call him. But to say that he's acting rationally, that is a stretch, and that is being dishonest with yourself. Because when you take it down, it is incredibly intelligent what he's doing, and very much thought out. This is not a spontaneous action.
Yeah, and like I just don't see I would need a great deal of evidence. I don't even know if I could think about what that evidence would be to say for me to be convinced to say that the guy's an idiot. Like I just, this is someone. I mean, Russia, the people in the FSB, the successor to the KGB, they're not fools. I don't think Putin's a fool. I don't think NATO is a fool. I don't think the U.S. State Department are populated by fools. Now they might not be populated by geniuses, but the point is that if this stuff was written in the popular press, again, Friedman's my go-to guy on this, but others have written about it as well. There's a story of the dog not barking. So people, this is where the narrative shaping comes in. People look at it and like, oh my goodness, poor little Ukraine's being beat up by big bad Russia, oh my God, Putin bad or whatever, right? And the answer is, well, that might be the narrative, but like, let's try to like dig back into it and see like what's going on here. It would be ridiculous to get your entire perspective from RT Today, just like it would be ridiculous to get your entire perspective from, CNN, Fox News, or the BBC. Like, I'm not saying don't go to them, don't see what's going on, but just understand that they have their agendas. They have their agendas and whatever. But very, very disappointing to see this pre-shaping to the narrative with what I sense is a paucity of critical thinking.
Yeah, and let's just take this. Let's compare and contrast what's going on from the Rona to what we're seeing now. What happened right when Rona came out? Why is it that every single mainstream media all comes out with the exact same thing? Nobody will even question it. Why is it that every single mainstream source will say the exact same thing about Rona? There is no second opinion. Any second opinion is evil. We saw this. If anyone that questioned masks don't work, they are anti-masker and they want old people to die. Anyone who does not want to take the medicine, they want people to die, even though we know that it was false. I mean, you can still spread it even if you got the medicine. Anybody who did not lock themselves down in March of 2020, they wanted people to die. I mean,
Yeah.
every single news headline had the exact same, they all had the same narrative, every single one, and every single one was wrong, but they don't take accountability for that, and no one calls them out for every single one not question it and going with the narrative yet being wrong. So knowing that they have a 100% accuracy of being wrong with what they're pushing, does that not make you question a little bit of what we're seeing today? Even if you don't have a great geopolitical edges, I don't. I have terrible. I don't know anything, jack squat. But you have to question it and find out, what is the goal? What incentive do these politicians have? And okay,
And the media.
exactly.
And the media.
So now we go to today. Has any single person watching this video, have you seen a headline that questions any of the political narrative? Have you seen a narrative that questions Russia bad, we have to help? Anything against that? Because I haven't. And that leads me to believe there is something deeper going on. I don't yet know what, and I'm sure that we will figure it out, because the truth always comes out, and that is just with due time. So what incentives do the politicians have? If you don't know, politicians only care about one thing, and that is one thing only, and that is power. And they will do anything. They would quite literally kick their grandmother down a flight of stairs to maintain or increase their power. And if you don't believe me, you have not studied history fast enough. Yes, there are exceptions, but there is not many. Like the Ron Pauls, there are very few of people like that. And the people in power today are not like that. They would quite literally kill one of their children to maintain or increase their power. And this is as messed up as it sounds. I would not say that as an exaggeration, Justin. Would you disagree with that statement?
The way its system works right now is to climb to the top of any large power structure, you have to
You have to backpack and backstab.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you want to know, like, there's a scene from Gone with the Wind where Scarlett O'Hara basically says, if I have to lie, steal, cheat, or kill, as God is my witness,
As God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again.
I will achieve my goal. Essentially, is what
Finding an enemy gets everyone hate Biden, Trudeau, these European prime ministers. They are terrible, the worst ratings in history. And war, getting the enemy off of our politicians and onto a new enemy will drive their ratings up. And we've seen this before with going to war to bail out the politicians. And I think so. What you were moaning and groaning that I disagree, Justin. So
No, I don't. I mean, I don't disagree, but I would say taking this. This will not apply to Biden, but I believe it applies to Trudeau, and I believe it applies to all of It applies to Merkel. It applies to Macron. It applies to Bojo. It might apply to Orban. I don't know about that, but my point is that look at the Europeans. And then look at the people who lead Europe, the prime ministers, and then ask yourself, how many of them actually have children? And I don't think many of them do. In fact, I think when I think about it, Biden obviously has kids. They don't. And here's the thing on this front. Like, when you look at the Europeans in general, there's this slow motion demographic bomb that's going off right now in Europe because, they're not having kids anymore. The population's not replacing itself. A woman, I think is 2.13, or the average birth rate per woman needs to be 2.13, because, you need a man and a wife or whatever, right? And the 0.13 is to account for the breakage, all the kids that won't have kids in turn. But anyways, 2.13 is the magic number. And if you don't have men and women coming together in a structure that produces children, so those children in turn can have children and then children and so on and so forth, like, what's the point? I mean, I feel like you kind of lost the plot. And so when I look at European leadership, it just gets back to these these contradictions. They have such beautiful dreams, such unrealistic dreams, and that's why it takes me back to Putin. And it's like I think Putin, at least coming back, if he cut his teeth during the twilight of the Soviet Union, and if he saw like the decimation that would occur from politicians, if you think our politicians are bad, check out commissars back in the day. But the point is that like I think Putin has a very realistic, I think it is plausible for him to have a very realistic, very pragmatic viewpoint on the world. And when I look at the European politicians, I just can't see the same thing for that. Again, from my ignorance, from my lack of understanding.
I would represent being a leader, and whether you like it or not, none of these Western nations have a leader in power, and for good or bad, we don't. If you think Biden or Trudeau is a leader amongst men, he is not. Putin, he is a leader, and for good or bad, he is a leader. And that is very important. And people are going to take this and think that we're pro-Russia and we want Putin to take over the world, which is not the case at all. We are just laying the facts out on the table. And the way they are, Putin is a leader. And I don't know how to discount that, because I'm just going to leave it at that. You can.
Well, fundamentally, this is the thing, is that you need to have a security policy backed up by geography that balances the security needs of Russia and the security needs of Western Europe. That's what you need to have. It is the height of foolishness to assume that you could bring Ukraine into NATO and maintain this balance, which leads me to believe I don't think that the leaders are they're stupid, but I don't think they're that stupid. And so I just kind of wonder how much of this is intentional and how much of this is like, oops.
Yeah. If you went to some of our older videos, we've talked about the fourth turning before, and thus far, they have only ever ended in war. Me and Justin have had a lot of discussions on the future of war, but I still think there will be a form of physical fighting. I don't know if
there already is. There already is.
There is, but I do not count that a full-blown like U.S. and joining a war yet. Right now, the war is on the mind and the misinformation. I am hoping that we can prevail and overcome in just this misinformation. It does not look likely, as people's narrative and their mindset changes so insanely quickly. I think they have to go through an extreme hardship to be able to see through the BS. And I hope that we can do that without a form of physical war.
For anyone who's read Calvin and Hobbes, there's an excellent Sunday one where Calvin goes to his mom and says, "Mom, I've decided to start smoking." And the mom very wisely says, "Okay, Calvin, that's fine. I think your grandfather left some cigarettes. Just, please smoke outside." So Calvin's like, "Wow, great." You see him then walking outside, and it's stuffed tiger who becomes real in Calvin's imagination. It's like, "Wow, your mom let you have a cigarette?" And Calvin is just lighting up saying, "Yep, for a mom, she's pretty cool at times." Calvin takes a drag, falls over, he turns purple, coughing, and Hobbes is looking down at him saying, "Oh my, this needs to be an easy habit to break," or whatever. The mom then sticks her head out the door and says, "Did we learn anything today?" At which point Calvin says, "Yeah, trusting parents can be hazardous for your health." The point in all of this is that if Calvin's mom said you can't smoke, what's the first thing Calvin would want to do? Smoke, 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 smoke. And so I thought it was some damn good parenting by the mom saying, "Listen, we're going to do this small thing that we know is going to be very destructive, or it's not going to be very pleasant, but we're going to put in just enough pain where we're not going to like damage Calvin in the long run, but we'll let him learn a lesson that will seem very real in the comfort of a home, because if he learns this lesson now, it's going to be a tremendous investment in like his mental self or like in his future, versus having to learn it like, when he's 50 being wheeled in for like, a partial lung transplant or whatever, right? I kind of wonder if the same thing could be applied to us in the West, or perhaps humans in general, that if we could go through just enough pain to, I don't want to say wake people up because that's, too cliche, but just enough of a shock where people can kind of pull back and see the reflection, but not to the extent where you have a complete and total catastrophic meltdown of the system.
Yes, just as a quick final thought, we are back again with our fancy jackets, and the main takeaway is this: to question everything. Even us, do not take anything that we say at face value. If you agree, disagree, don't take it at face value. Dig deeper and find the truth, because that is what this should be about, is finding the truth. The same thing should always apply, is what is right and what is the truth, because that's what matters at the end of the day. And if you trust these headlines or anything, don't take. I learned an extraordinarily valuable lesson from a great hedge fund manager. His name is Morris Sachs. We were on the phone and we were talking about the Eurodollar futures curve, and he took nothing I say at face value, nothing. He didn't trust a single word that I said until he could prove it. And I thought that was an extremely valuable lesson. So I would say, okay, the Eurodollar futures curve is inverting looking at the 2023 or 2024. And he says, I have not yet heard this. Let me look it up. So he spent 5 minutes looking this up to prove or disprove what I'm saying, because you can't take anything that we say at face value. So do the research, find out what you believe the truth is, and see if you can continuously prove or disprove that. But don't take anything anyone says at face value unless you know it to be fact.
Trust, but verify.
Exactly. Skeptically trust someone. This is not to say don't trust anything anyone says.
Especially that person.
Yeah. So without further ado, we will see you guys on the next one.